Klaus Laitenberger from Germany, South Germany, now living in Leitrim. Klaus worked as the head gardener at the Organic Centre in County Leitrim for 7 years. He is an acclaimed author of a number of Irish gardening books, lectured on the MSc in Organic Horticulture at UCC, and currently works as an organic inspector for the Organic Trust. He has grown a diverse range of alternative and novel food crops, mainly from the Andes region in South America. This year, Klaus was the tutor of Knott's inaugural online course, Growing in Polytunnels, which was a major success with 350 participants from all over Ireland. So very much looking forward to this one, because my wife and I are thinking about joining that course the next time it's running. So Klaus, over to you.
Thank you very much, Will, for your introduction, and thank you for Knott's for inviting me to talk. It's a little bit of a very topical and very unusual subject. Can soils solve the climate crisis? So I've always been into soil fertility. We've had loads of campaigns already, People for Soil campaign and the various soil conferences with Knott's. And for some reason, we've never really fully managed to raise awareness fully in the public. So maybe this will work. So can soil solve our climate crisis, and the importance of soil fertility and organic matter? So when I researched the topic, I went to Wikipedia and I looked for the causes of climate change. And strangely enough, the most important one wasn't even mentioned. So their causes of climate change are burning of fossil fuels and deforestation, but they did not mention soil degradation and this desertification for some strange reason. And all the speakers that I hear in the BioFarm conference will totally disagree with this statement. So sad news first, the Food and Agricultural Organizations of the United Nations, they reckon that in 2050 we have 10 billion people living on this earth, but already 25% of the global land is degraded, and more degraded every single year. We lose billions of topsoil every year, and they warned us that we may only have about 60 more harvests left. Now, how does that work with an increasing world population and running out of land to feed it? While we need to have 50% increase in food production to feed this growing world population. So it's a big problem that we face. A much bigger problem than climate change is soil degradation. So we need to really stop treating soil like dirt. Everything on this earth depends on that thin layer of topsoil. Soils, on the other hand, can be the solution for climate change, and I will explain that in detail now in a few minutes. Just a few carbon facts. There are 9.4 billion metric tons of carbon in the atmosphere. That has increased 40% in the last 150 years. There's 3,000 billion metric tons of carbon in the soil, though, which is 300 times as much as we currently release. If you imagine the carbon that's in the soil, there's twice as much carbon in the soil than there's in all the plants on the earth, on all the green fields in Ireland, the rainforests, and all the green plants all over the world, plus in the atmosphere, and that's twice over. That's how much carbon is in the soil at present. I often find when I hear about climate and carbon, I have a strange kind of niggling about it, because carbon is a vital element. Every farmer, every gardener knows the importance of carbon. Carbon is in the air, it's in plants, it's in the soil, it's in the form of organic matter. And with the carbon cycle, maybe I just explain it for a second, most people are aware of it, but plants photosynthesize. And that's the way that carbon gets into the plant. And then it gets into the soil as the plants die. Microorganisms then, in the form of mineralization, they break down the carbon and release it again into the atmosphere. But not all of it is released. Some of it is bound to surfaces on soil minerals, and it's safely locked away for hundreds of years sometimes. So that's the carbon stored that we have in the soil. But all through this harmless nutrient or element called carbon, which is now demonized really by so many people for it. Just to explain a little bit about soil, and I know maybe it's a bit basic for some people, but maybe it's important for others. Soils have been formed through the breakdown of rocks. 95% of our soils constituents are ground up rock. So that's the physical matter of it. So that's the majority, 95% of it. But then there's the magic 5%, and that's the organic matter, or soil organic matter, what we refer to. And that's everything that is and was alive. So microbes, decomposing plants, living plant roots, everything that has the living part of it, or worms, etc. So that's the organic matter content. And out of that organic matter, sometimes you see people referring to SOC, that's soil organic carbon. And a little bit more than 50% of the organic matter is actually carbon, pure carbon. And it has so many benefits, and every speaker at this conference probably will have reported kind of their successes. If you add compost, if you add organic matter to the soil, it improves the water holding capacity, it improves the porosity of your soil, also improves drainage. I'll continue. It decreases compaction, it improves the tilth of the soil. That's how the water infiltrates into the soil and thus controls erosion. It also stimulates life in the soil. Like one handful of living soil contains more living creatures than there's people on the earth. Also, there's been loads of research conducted in recent years that compost or organic matter applications prevent plant diseases on plants. So you get healthier plants. And of course, they provide slow release plant nutrients and also trace elements. Now, for the last few decades, we probably haven't done that anymore. We haven't added organic matter to the soil, but I'll come to that in a minute. So really, knowing all that, we should treat our soils with the utmost respect, nearly with love, as the giver of all life on earth. We came from the earth, we'll go back to the earth as well. And the biggest threat that we face as a human species is soil degradation, really. It's the biggest effect. If we only have a few decades of harvests, if we continue with the way we farm, it is the most urgent thing that we have to solve. Now, the interesting bit, and that's why I'm cross with Wikipedia for not mentioning soils as a reason for climate change. As the soils have become degraded over the last 50 years, maybe even much further, but accelerating in the last 50 years, is that as they have become degraded, the carbon was released into the atmosphere. We've taken that carbon out of the soil and put it up into the atmosphere. And that was the big problem, really. That causes soil to become dirt. And as you heard from Gabe Brown or read his book, From Dirt to Soil, our soils are becoming dirt when the carbon is not in the soil anymore. So definitely that was one of the biggest contributors to climate change. It was to make our soils infertile again. What are the causes? What took the carbon out of the soil? We probably all know that intensive farming methods are to be blamed. Monocropping, the lack of rotations, growing cereal crops the same every year. For the last 40 years in the southeast of Ireland, we've grown barley in the same field without any additions of compost or manures put into it. Tom Foohey, of course, one of our great growers in Ireland, he would have a much better solution to that. Lack of cover crops and the use of artificial fertilizers. They are probably one of the most serious problems that we have, the use of artificial fertilizers, N, P, and K. Maybe not many people realize that the production of nitrogen alone with the Haber-Bosch process uses 5% of the world's gas consumption. Like, that's carbon left, right, and center. Nobody even talks about it. Also using fertilizers, nitrogen in the soil. There's a carbon to nitrogen ratio in the soil. So if you add nitrogen to the soil, it needs carbon to neutralize it, to bring it to the right ratio. So that loses carbon as well. Use of pesticides used on soil, fungicides, etc., that kills soil life also take carbon out of the soil. So what's the solution? It's very simple, really. It's to put the carbon back into the soil where it belongs to, and that will make our soil more fertile again for future generations. And also plant more trees on farmland. Much better to let farmers look after the land and grow trees rather than these large-scale plantations of Sitka spruce that we have in Leitrim especially. So, of course, we have the pioneers here: Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin, Tom Foohey, Richard Perkins, Christine Jones, Bruno Fallader. And that's interesting. That's what I want to talk about a little bit now. None of them really focuses on climate change, but they focus on the real thing. They focus on making our soils fertile again and creating beautiful, diverse plants, ecosystems, and making our world a better and more beautiful place. The fact that they actually take carbon and putting it into the soil is a byproduct. We are focusing far too much, I think, on just this reductionist thing of carbon as the big evil force. You'll see loads of excellent presentations, and if you haven't seen them yet, on regenerative farming, conservation farming, holistic grassland management, biodynamic agriculture, agroforestry, permaculture. All these methods increase soil organic matter. And really, I'd love to be a politician and be able to decide we have to convert all our land to regenerative farming in Ireland. That would as quickly solve all the problems that we face. Christine Jones' talk, please listen to it, diverse seed mixtures and how that improves soil carbon content, reducing tillage, optimizing grazing. So you'll see all of that in that wonderful conference. But the big thing really is adding carbon to the soil through composted manure. That's one of the things that we have neglected to do in the last few decades, since the advent of artificial fertilizers, the easy, quick fix, drip feed method of how to feed the plants instead of feeding the soil. So our focus is really about doing the right things to make our soil fertile again. Increase biodiversity of life above and below ground, and then climate change will come automatically, the remediation. We need to focus on the right things, and then that will put itself in place. So a little bit more facts. There's a movement in France called the 4 per mil, and they reckon they have a scheme where a 0.4% increase in organic matter annually will offset 1/3 of global emissions from fossil fuels derived sources. So that's a great little, a great scheme. So if everybody increases their organic matter content by 0.4%. I asked a friend of mine, Professor Peter Jones from UCC, great person. I have the calculations from him in the next slides, but a 1% increase in soil organic carbon, okay, that's carbon, so it'll be probably 2%, close to 2% increase in organic matter. That would reduce the carbon dioxide concentrations from 410 parts per million to 364 parts per million. That's 1990 levels, and we would have a healthy, fertile soil. So I'll let you have a look at those slides now, and you can maybe pause them and study them afterwards, but it would take time to go through them now. Also, on another source, if we were to restore 2 million out of the 5 million hectares of already degraded land, that would be the equivalent of 20 years carbon emissions. That is an awful lot, isn't it? And we would have 2 million more fertile hectares to feed the 10 billion people in 2050. Now, sorry for annoying you again. Probably Sean has heard enough of my Jerusalem artichoke story, and I gave a big presentation last year on Jerusalem artichoke, but still, I think this is the crop for the future. You could use this as a climate crop. The plant on the right with the yellow flowers, it's related to sunflowers. It grows to over 2, some plants grow up to 3 meters tall, producing lovely tubers like that, similar to potato, but really much better than potatoes. I know a lot of people would disagree with me. They yield phenomenal. They yield at least twice as much as potatoes. But why I think it's really important, it's the phenomenal top growth. They grow to about 2 to 3 meters, I said. And last year I mentioned a Russian researcher found that Jerusalem artichoke sequestered twice as much carbon as a forest would. Most people probably wouldn't believe me, and I couldn't find the proper research paper. I tried to contact him and Peter Jones as well. So we did the research ourselves. I grew 15 different varieties this year, and I harvested the tops and weighed them. And I came to a total yield of the top growth, which is 3 meter tall, of 113 tons per hectare, top growth. Now, Peter Jones did the calculation for me, and they're here. And now that's the results, and I give you the calculations in a minute. So we compared that to how much carbon dioxide was sequestered from Jerusalem artichoke compared to the highest yielding citrus spruce plantations, which are the YC24. So Jerusalem artichoke tops, the second line, they sequester 56 tons of carbon dioxide per hectare per year, while citrus spruce only sequestered 16.2 tons of carbon dioxide per hectare per year. We didn't take the tubers underground into account, but if you were to take them into account, it would be 86.8 tons of carbon dioxide per hectare per year. But what I want to say is, even just taking the tops into account, this is 3.5 times more than citrus spruce plantations, and a lot more sustainable, probably. So that's the calculations. I slowly go through the slides, and you can just look at them in more detail, how he calculated it. I'm a big fan, as you know, I'm a big fan of Jerusalem artichokes. And I think maybe some department person listening to that, it would be the most perfect environmental scheme. Carbon, if we were to plant in the new glass scheme or so, if we were to plant only 0.2% of the land area in Jerusalem artichoke, or maybe we find similar carbon sequestering crops, that would be 10,000 hectares, because Ireland has 5 million hectares of agricultural land. We would sequester 560,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year. That's quite a phenomenal thing. I've seen Jerusalem artichokes grown in Slane, and this plantation, it's a 20-meter wide strip, or maybe just 15 meters, and it's hundreds of meters long, all along woodlands. And they use it as a bird habitat for ground nesting birds. It's an ideal thing for pheasants, for other wildlife to hide in, and it's never been harvested. So the artichokes are always underneath in the ground. The only maintenance is they top it once a year, and the tubers will resprout again in spring, and it'll come up. So that stand is over 30 years old, and it's once a lifetime planting, and nothing else needs to be done afterwards. Now, I'm a bit silly sometimes, so I actually calculated how much yield we would get from it. In case, who knows, we had a little worry last year, or this year, with COVID and logistical problems. People were panic buying food, they were buying seeds, like all the seeds and food was sold out quickly. But that was with enough food in the world. But what if there is a crisis in the future? What if the population does increase and we wouldn't have enough food, or if there is a logistics problem? This plantation, the 10,000 hectares alone, would give us 800,000 tons of food, based on 80 tons per hectare, which is easily achieved times 10,000 hectares. And the beauty of it is, it can just stay there. It could rest there for years, and if there is a problem at any time of the year, we could just dig up the tubers and at least have something. Now, I don't want to be scaremongering like that, but it's handy to have, even if in your own garden or in your own setup, to have a crop like that you could just at some stage dig a few tubers if you wanted. And it came originally from the Native Americans from North America. And that's the way they used it. Only in times of crisis they would have gone and found the Jerusalem artichokes, they would survive on their own. They don't need people. You plant them once and they'll live forever. Another excellent use for Jerusalem artichokes, and I think that's one of the reasons why we should grow them as a vegetable crop, is its high content of inulin. Inulin is the ideal food for people suffering from diabetes. And another really good reason is the bioremediation. That means growing this crop on polluted land will absorb heavy metals, will absorb other pollutants out of it, and it could be used then for biofuel, or so, the leaves, and then the heavy metals could be collected. So it has a lot of potential for that as well. So hopefully I've convinced maybe some policymakers or somebody to embrace this crop and see what we can do. Now, I want to talk a little bit philosophical. Charles Eisenstein, I hope you've read some of his books or listened to some of his podcasts. I think what we are facing at the moment is an oversimplification of the whole environmental problems that we are facing. Everything is to do with carbon. Everything is to do with climate change. But we're forgetting an awful lot of environmental problems. Soil is the one that I mentioned before, or biodiversity, the extinction of species, and a whole load of other factors. And for some reason, we need to approach it differently. We need to love all these things to protect them. And we mustn't just simplify that problem and put everything into the box of carbon and carbon reduction and finding a solution with it. So listen now to Charles Eisenstein. While we were talking about carbon reduction, one very serious thing happened in Ireland and throughout the whole of Europe: ash dieback. And it upsets me really because most people haven't even heard about it. All our ash trees will be dying within the next probably 10 years. They'll become extinct, most likely. Maybe 1, maybe 2, 3% will survive. I asked a forester to calculate how many ash trees there are, and he reckoned there's about 300 million ash trees. 200 in plantations, 100 million throughout the Irish countryside. And they're dying, and there's nothing they do anymore. The department has given up. How could that disease have come in from sheer negligence, ignorance, or maybe more possibly stupidity, really? Because it kept creeping throughout Europe for the last decade before it came into Ireland, and we still imported ash trees, diseased ash trees at that stage, into Ireland. So that kind forester, he offered the figure for me. The annual loss of carbon sequestration from all the ash trees is 360,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year. Imagine that. And as soon as a tree is sick, it doesn't sequester any more carbon. It even releases a little bit. It still acts as a sink, but it doesn't sequester anymore. Just a few facts. I'm quickly going through them. I'm not going into details. The EU, thank God, though, is waking up, and I'm absolutely delighted with it. They kind of quantified the problems that we have with compaction, with desertification. They even put a cost on it, that the cost of soil degradation exceeds 50 billion euros per year. But that's the policy in the EU, soil health and food policy. They want to restore 50% of the degraded land, increase the carbon concentration by 0.1 to 0.4% annually. At the moment, we lose 0.5% of organic matter that goes up into the sky, into the atmosphere. And the next one, look at that. They want to achieve a minimum of 25% of the EU land area certified organic by 2030. So in 10 years' time, we go from 2% in Ireland up to 25%. This is phenomenal. So I'm really excited about it. Reduction of fertilizer use by 20% and reduction of pesticide by 50%. So at least we're really on the right track. And I find it hard to see with current policies how that can be achieved, but I think it's a good start. And so thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope it was some food for thought in terms of carbon. And what I'm hoping to get out of it, that we really focus maybe on all the little bits that are influencing the bigger picture, and we'll sort everything that way. Thank you.
Five, four, three, two, one.
Klaus, thank you so much for that brilliant presentation. Really enjoyed it. And now all I can think is, why haven't I heard of Jerusalem artichoke before?
Good one. I think in Ireland people will get bored of hearing me talk about it soon.
Yeah, incredible benefits to it. I've been furiously scribbling down all the things you said here.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing, and it's the easiest vegetable to grow, I always say. If you fail to grow Jerusalem artichokes, you should hang up your gardening spade. You're not deserved to be a gardener. All you need to do is throw a tuber in the ground and you'll have it.
That sounds like something even I could grow. Just one thing I want to ask before we get into the questions that listeners are sending in. Traditionally, throughout my sort of farming career, agriculture and horticulture have been seen almost as separate industries. Do you think that they're moving closer together now? And as farmers and people in agriculture, we can learn a lot from horticulture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they belong together. And all my training was late 80s in biodynamic agriculture, farming, and it's together. In biodynamics, you do need the farm, you do need the garden. It's always been that holistic system where you had to have the right amount of animals to produce the right amount of manure, to produce the right amount of crops, etc. It's all an organism within itself. So I think horticulture and agriculture, but also forestry or farming trees should go together. They've all have become separated, as you said. But there is a place for it to come together, rather having all three separate blocks.
Okay, let's go to some questions. Michael Devery, apologies if I'm mispronouncing your surname, but does Klaus see any engagement from Irish government on paying for carbon sequestration, like Christine Jones mentioned?
I think it would be a great idea, Sean. I think and it could be measurable to some way. Per 1% increase in organic matter in your soil, you could get certain payments. The trouble is, like listening to Gabe Brown's, it's very hard to measure exactly, and I could see that as the major obstacle of doing that. What do you think, Sean, to get accurate figures in?
Yeah, I don't know. There's no point in me saying I do, except that, everything's now is up for grabs, I think, and that's maybe what Chris said as well, that governments are starting to look at this in a slightly different approach. And maybe it's going to come from business first. Maybe the idea that businesses will pay farmers for reducing their carbon emissions through crews sequestering carbon, maybe where it's going to happen, and it could be in that public-private partnership. What you'll probably see is if New Zealand if Australia's taken an initiative, countries like New Zealand, and we're closer to New Zealand. I think Nicole Masters will have more to talk about on that in the next presentation.
Yeah, but maybe we're going down the wrong track with it as well. I'm not 100% sure, Chris. Like, should we only focus on the carbon, or should we not just focus on the more important thing, that we make our soils more fertile again? We get the life back into the soil. We get all these positive benefits. Carbon is then a side effect. It naturalizes. Then I'm not sure what to think, really.
Yeah, it's a tough one, I think. And I think I mentioned the last thing is this shouldn't be seen as a subsidy. We grow carbon, we grow livestock, we grow crops. They're all a crop that should be paid for if the farmer's putting in the work.
Yeah.
So that's the way I would see it. So it's just another enterprise on the farm. So till we get to that, I think that mindset in particular, then we're probably not going to be at anything. I think otherwise subsidise here, subsidies there. I think that's where it should be.
Okay. A question about my new favourite crop, Jerusalem artichokes. What would you have to do to the top growth of the artichokes to keep the carbon sequestered?
Yeah, so you have two options. Either you grow it as a vegetable in a garden, and then obviously you'd cut the top. It matures quite late. That's the one thing. It's only time now for harvesting them when the tops have already turned brown and dying back. So these big long sunflower-like stalks, you cut them off, and then you could either put them into the compost and let the carbon go there, or you'd leave them on the ground. Then you can dig out the tubers and eat them, and the yield is phenomenal. But in the picture you've seen in Slane Castle for the wildlife corridor, their management is cut it in February, late February, leave the stalks lying on the ground to decompose to get the carbon back in. And that was amazing. I was in Slane Castle there recently, and I took a little bit of soil from the Jerusalem artichoke place and from the field outside, and it was exactly like Gabe Brown's image earlier. One was dark brown, crumbly soil, while the one on the grassland outside was the light, pale brown soil. So definitely the amount of carbon that was sequestered and deposited in the ground was amazing. So just leaving the tubers in the ground, no management, just the one cut, leaving the foliage to lie on the ground. That was the management as a climate crop or as a wildlife bird cover crop.
Okay. Couple of questions. Oh, sorry, Sean, did you want to?
I was going to ask Klaus on that question, a follow-on was, Klaus, if you're cutting the tops, and we're just talking about the tops in terms of carbon sequestration, is it still not cycling? Because that crop is going to grow back up. Okay, a certain amount will be returned back to the atmosphere, but in the following year, that crop is going to sequester more carbon back into its tops again. So it's creating this cycling system, and I've read somewhere that that's often as advantageous as anything else.
Yeah, it's true. Like they break down, the nutrients will be released, mineralized. Some nutrients will be going up again, but others will be deposited in the ground.
And the growing plant the following year, because it's a perennial, it's going to sequester more carbon than that.
Absolutely, because the growth is 3 meters every year. With what I'm not a climate expert, so don't query me too much. But Professor Peter Jones said that trees only sequester carbon for a number of weeks when they actively grow, while the Jerusalem artichoke crop, it's a very long season crop. So from March, the shoots come up, till November they start to grow. So it's a much longer period of carbon sequestration.
Okay, a couple of questions about composting now. Question from Nick Bardsley. Can compost tea substitute for compost? Given the challenges of farm-scale composting? I
doubt it in terms of carbon sequestration, because it's a liquid form. There's very little bulky material in it that can do it. But compost teas are primarily used for disease-suppressing crops or keeping your soil healthy or injecting bacteria or fungi and enlivening the soil. But I'm not sure it will have the same benefit than pure compost. But listening to Gabe Brown and the species diversity mixtures and Christine Jones, that's probably more beneficial than compost teas, I would imagine. Okay.
Anonymous question here. Does Klaus or anyone else know where smallholders can get hold of the compost made by local councils or companies?
Yeah, there's quite a number of them. The one that's certified organic at the moment is called Enrich, ENRICH. They make a marvelous compost. We got some for Sean there recently, didn't we, to try out a few crops, and it's absolutely amazing substance. The Composting Association in Ireland is called CRE, C-R-E. I'm not an Irish speaker, so do I pronounce that right?
That's okay. We'll let you go with that.
You don't know yourself, John. So that's CRE. There's also local ones, like I'm in up Leitrim, Sligo area. There's one in a composting plant in Ballysadare. So they do green waste composting. That's so that there's a number of sources of it. I think green waste compost is better than or safer to use than municipal compost. But any bulky material that you can get, leaf mold, now is a great time to get as much leaves from the garden together. I'm also a big fan in the last few years of wood chips, composting wood chips. Sean, you're not too fond of it, or you're
No,
you're
it's not
worried?
that at all. I think actually, Bruno Falador talked about this in great detail last night, and I think he started a lot of people thinking, and I think most farms could probably do their own compost quite successfully.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that knowledge. We ran a course with Jim Cronin, and we had a great turnout, and it's very much a similar approach.
Yeah.
But I think the easy option is often to go buy this stuff. I think if we can get it to a quality where we can make it ourselves.
Yeah.
Again, it's that cycling that nutrients on the farm.
Yeah, for a garden, I work in a garden in Bundoran there in County Donegal Community Gardens, and we every year get a lorry load full of composted wood chips from a tree surgeon. And it's a nice mixed, it's not from forestry, so it's not acidic, which was your worry, isn't it?
Well, funny if Bruno Falador kind of threw that all out.
Threw that out.
Night, yeah,
and I think it does wonders to soil. I often dig a trench, put it on pathways, and the fungal growth that you get, the mycelium growing out of it into the soil, is phenomenal. But I feel all that carbon gone into the soil, and it really transforms the soil, I think. There was always this worry about immobilization of nitrogen, and that's what I learned at university and told people, but I'm not 100% convinced anymore. When we get it, it's already half decomposed. I wonder. I haven't had negative effects of it.
Yeah, I would echo Sean there. Bruno's talk last night was fantastic. Certainly got me thinking. And anyone who missed it, make sure you catch up later. Question here from, and heartfelt apologies. I have no idea how to pronounce your name, which I feel very ashamed about. But it's, I'll go with Ain. Apologies. Please ask Klaus how we can continue his mission for a law on the protection of the soil. It was mentioned from the Science Week promotion this week that due to climate change, it's a big advantage to avail of GM foods. So how do we inform government and policy that regenerative farming as well is limiting deforestation?
Yeah, we had various campaigns. About 3 or 4 years ago, there was a People for Soil campaign, an EU campaign, where we tried to get 1 million signatures within the European Union to get some legislation to protect soils, and we failed. There was only 2 countries in the EU, and that was Ireland and Italy, that managed to get enough signatures needed for it. And our slogan, do you mind passing me that T-shirt there, please, Mark? Was called "Stop Treating Soil Like Dirt." I still have the T-shirt with me and brought it along. It's pretty good, isn't it?
Fantastic. Yeah.
And the People for Soil campaign. And we only got like 200,000 signatures throughout the whole European Union. So soil isn't as cool or sexy as defending other bits. For some reason, we haven't made that interesting enough. But maybe installing fear that we have 60 harvests left may help that some. But now that, I don't know if you've seen the last slide in my presentation, the European Union is actually actively working towards better soil health for the future, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we've been led down a path that's a high input system that the corporate world can make lots of money out of. And it's people like Christine Jones, people like Klaus, Jim Cronin, Gabe Brown, all those people who have a different perspective, who are finally getting there. And I think, Louis Macaulay said it yesterday, I thought, the ability to access other information from the internet, networks like Base Ireland or the Danu Group that's shown there is a different way. I think all these things are finally leading to people saying, okay, maybe there is something, we've got to look into this. And, Gabe Brown said it subtly this morning, or earlier today, is at the heart of it, he showed the picture of the euros. And the heart of it, farmers have to make money. But if we can show them a route that they can make money by doing these things, then I think, science is going to have to, and in other countries it definitely has come this way, they're just going to have to follow us, and that's it.
Yeah. The second part is a big, long one. Shall we try and answer it shortly? So yeah, they reckon that GM food will solve the world. So if we destroy all our soils, if we make them whatever, so we breed crops that will grow genetically modify them that will grow in these degenerated soils. Now that's total rubbish. We all know that, isn't it? So the emphasis should be making our soils healthy for future generations, and we can do it. Like they all showed it, all the speakers in your conference showed how can we make our soil fertile again, and that's the only way to do it. So that GM issue is only driven by big companies. And I went to Argentina in my scholarship, Nuffield scholarship last year, and it's sad to see that as far as the eye can see, soybean production, genetically modified, but the GM breeding that they do is never for the good of people, it's for the good of business. So that soybean is genetically modified so the farmer can spray Roundup over it, glyphosate over it. And they do the same for maize, for lentils, for a whole range of crops. It's to make life easier for them. It's rarely for the good of the world. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an even bigger issue in the sense that, this is technologies that the corporate world want to push on it, whether it's GM or whether it's robotic tractors or everything else. It's another cost to a farm business that currently has so many additional costs on it that it's this corporate world feeding the monster that's feeding off everybody else, and the farmer's at the bottom rung here and he's taking pressures from everybody. So like the GM thing to me is kind of half dead. It practically has to exist with full use of Roundup. Nutrient density food is the next thing that's coming down the tracks, and I think it's going to fail miserably. And I think if GM was that wonderful, why have the large corporate worlds refused and stopped and pushed this idea that they shouldn't have made with GM food on their packaging? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
The consumers doesn't want it.
Yeah. The other thing that should be labelled, is glyphosate residues. Nearly all food that we eat now has glyphosate residues in it. I think customers should demand glyphosate on the label if it contains glyphosate. I think it's just common sense. It's if you believe it's damaging to your health or not, it doesn't matter, but at least we should know if it's in food. And apparently it's in nearly everything that we eat because crops are being desiccated with it.
I was just interested to ask you then, moving on from what you said about the GM, do you have the similar thoughts about gene editing and sort of CRISPR technology?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I would, because it's going down the same line. But when I was on my Nuffield scholarship, I was traveling for 6 weeks with people that would totally endorse this technology. And but again, we saw some examples. We saw the first apple that was with that CRISPR technique. They edited out a gene that causes browning in the apple. So that apple could be sold in aeroplanes, sliced and doesn't turn brown. So it's kind of silly things that do happen from these processes. So I'm not convinced, that it's for the good of the real quality of food for it.
Sean, do you have any other questions there?
I have a couple of questions. One is, how expensive is Jerusalem artichoke seed?
See, they're not really available yet. There are a few growers who grow them. Alpha Gerard, we might go down. I have 15 different varieties that I'm trialing, got from all over the place. So the problem with them often is they're knobbly. So I'm looking for a smooth one. I'm also looking for a strong one that grows strong and doesn't blow over because they're quite tall and top heavy. The tubers that I bought, I think they were €2 a kilo. But you can start off small. The yield is phenomenal. You plant 10 tubers and you have 100. You can harvest 100 edible tubers, enough for your supply. But for a large scale, I'd suggest get maybe one sack, multiply it yourself, and then do more of it.
Okay, and Ben Colchester has entered the question. Has Klaus any idea how artichoke could compare with Russian comfrey for carbon sequestration?
Yeah, a lot more. So what they do is maybe that calculation that Peter Jones did, maybe if you see that presentation later, you could linger on those slides, because it's the top weight. I measured the fresh weight of the Jerusalem artichokes, the tops, and that was 11.3 kilos a square meter on average. So multiplied, it was 11.3 tons. And then the dry matter of that is 27%. And then from there on, he went on to do the calculations. Russian comfrey is very watery. When you harvest the leaves, there will be a very low dry matter, and the yield will be maybe just a fraction of it. Sunflowers probably would come close to Jerusalem artichokes.
Just a question from me. I haven't watched it yet, but have you watched the Kiss the Ground documentary?
I haven't.
That's been on Netflix.
And I feel bad about it. Have you, Sean?
No.
Oh dear.
I just wondered if we could have done a quick review, but I haven't watched it yet. It's on my to-watch list.
Yeah.
I've heard mixed reviews, so I was just wondering what your opinions were. But generally, are you encouraged then that I mean, regenerative farming and soil health is slowly moving it into the mainstream, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about it in farming circles for a while, but things like that, and just lately I've noticed Patagonia, the clothing company, talking about regenerative agriculture in their social media, and it is kind of creeping out a little bit into the mainstream press, isn't it?
Yeah. No, do you know what I think is there's a momentum that has gathered for a long, long time, and COVID-19 has shown that humanity can act really, really quickly. And it can, before we thought we were unable to change. And now with COVID-19, everything, the whole world is turned around and changed. And I think it'll be exactly the same with organic, regenerative, holistic, biodynamic farming, that it'll take total momentum. It'll be up 100% very soon, I think, because more and more people, if you could choose to eat glyphosate food, endowed food or none, you'd pick that one, definitely. So I'm very hopeful.
Yeah, we need
I'm
some
a dreamer.
hope at the moment. We all need some hope at the moment.